They moved my only road while I was out of town. Not repaired it. Not blocked it for a few hours. They erased it like it had never existed. I live on 10 acres at the very end of a gravel road that's been there longer than I've been alive. The road runs a little over half a mile from County Route 18 straight back to my front gate, cutting through rolling pasture and old cedar fence lines. It was laid down in 1964, back when this part of Tennessee was more cattle than cul-de-sacs, and it's not fancy by any stretch. No pavement, no streetlights, just packed gravel, red clay underneath, and a recorded easement that guarantees I can get to my house without asking anyone's permission. That road is my lifeline. Groceries come down it. UPS trucks bounce down it. My sister drove down it the day we buried our dad. When you live rural like this, access isn't convenience. It's survival. For years, the land between my property and the highway was owned by an old farmer named Delmar. He leased it for soybeans, never bothered anyone, and once told me, "As long as I'm breathing, nobody's building condos out here." Delmar passed 2 winters ago. His kids didn't farm. They sold. That's when Harbor Crest Development showed up. They rolled in with glossy brochures and a temporary sign by the highway that read, "Stonehaven Preserve, Luxury Living in the Hills." Under that, smaller print, executive homes starting in the 800s. They brought survey stakes, drones, and a project manager named Brandon Kessler who drove a black Range Rover so clean it looked waxed twice a day. The first time I met Brandon, he was standing near the entrance to my gravel road with a civil engineer, both of them studying maps on a tablet. I pulled up in my F-150 and rolled down the window. "You planning on paving my driveway?" I asked. He laughed like I'd made a charming joke. "We're just reviewing the layout. Beautiful property you've got back there. I use that road every day," I said, keeping it simple. "It's my only access." He nodded. "Of course. We're aware there's an easement." I told him it wasn't just some handshake agreement. It was recorded, permanent, filed with the county since '64. He smiled, real smooth. "We'll make sure everything's handled appropriately." That phrase stuck with me. Handled appropriately. It sounded like something you say when you plan to handle it your way. Still, I didn't lose sleep over it. Developers come and go. Paperwork is paperwork. My easement was ironclad. I had copies in my filing cabinet and digital scans on my computer. I figured worst case, we'd have a few awkward conversations. 2 months later, I left town for 5 days to visit my sister in Missouri. She'd just had knee replacement surgery and needed help around the house. I locked up, set the porch light on a timer, and didn't think twice. The drive back home was long, 12 hours of highway and podcasts and gas station coffee. I remember feeling that good kind of tired, the kind where you just want your own bed and your own quiet. I turned off Route 18 at sunset and stopped dead. Where my gravel road should have been, there was a massive dirt berm, 8, maybe 9 feet tall, 50 feet across, packed tight like it had been pressed by God's own thumb. On top of it ran a construction fence with bright orange mesh and metal posts. Signs every 20 feet. Private property. No trespassing. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd taken the wrong turn. I sat there in my truck, engine idling, staring at it. The mailbox cluster was gone. The old wooden post with my address number had been ripped out. The mouth of the road had been carved up and graded flat, then redirected into a freshly paved street curving left toward what I assumed was the entrance to their development. They hadn't just blocked my road. They had erased it. I got out of the truck and walked closer. The gravel was gone, scraped away. I could see where the old path had been torn up, leveled, and rolled into part of their main boulevard. Streetlights were already installed. Concrete curbs. A decorative stone sign that said Stonehaven Preserve. A security guard in a neon vest came jogging over from a temporary trailer. "Sir, this is a restricted construction zone." I pointed at the berm. "My house is back there." He blinked. "There's no residential access beyond this point. I live beyond this point." He shifted his weight like he'd been trained not to argue. "You'll need to contact the site office." I called Brandon from right there, standing in front of the pile of dirt that used to be my road. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Matt. What's up?" "What's up?" "My driveway is gone," I said. There was a pause. Not surprise, just a pause. "Oh, yeah, we realigned that corridor. The original path cut directly through our primary boulevard. It didn't make sense from a design standpoint." "You realigned my access?" We created a new access point on the east boundary. It's actually an improvement. Better grading. Smoother entry. I didn't ask for a new access point. He exhaled, just slightly annoyed. Matt, this benefits everyone. The old gravel track was outdated. This way you've got a more modern connection. You blocked the only legal access to my property. We didn't block it. We relocated it. That's when something in me went quiet. Not angry quiet. Cold quiet. I'll call you back, I said, and hung up. I stood there another minute, listening to construction equipment in the distance, watching the sun drop behind a row of trees that used to frame my road. I realized something simple and ugly in that moment. They didn't think I mattered. To them, I was an inconvenience in the middle of a master plan. A lone house at the end of a line item. And while I was out of town helping my sister walk to the bathroom, they had decided my rights were flexible. I drove to a motel 15 minutes away and got a room for the night. Then I started making calls. I didn't sleep much that night. Motel mattresses have a way of reminding you you're not where you belong. And every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was that berm, sitting there like a middle finger made of dirt. Around midnight, I pulled out my laptop and started digging through my files. I had scanned copies of everything years ago when Dad passed, and I realized I was the last one responsible for that land. The easement document was dated June 3rd, 1964. Typed, signed, notarized. It clearly described a 60-foot right-of-way running from Route 18 straight back to what is now my front gate. It said perpetual. It said appurtenant. It said runs with the land. There was nothing vague about it. At 6:30 the next morning, I called my attorney, Laura Bennett. I've known Laura since high school. She's not flashy. She drives a Subaru with dog hair in the back seat and keeps her hair in a messy bun most days. But when it comes to property law in this county, she's the person other lawyers quietly call when they're in trouble. She answered on the second ring. Matt, you don't usually call me at sunrise. Who died? They moved my road. Silence. What do you mean moved? I mean it's gone. Bulldozed. There's a dirt wall where the entrance used to be. She didn't say anything for a second. Then, very calm, send me pictures. Send me the easement. I drove back to the site before construction crews fully ramped up. I took photos of everything. The berm from multiple angles. The destroyed gravel bed. The new paved boulevard cutting across what used to be my right-of-way. I even walked along the fence line until I found where they'd tried to carve a new gravel spur off the east side of the property, narrow and winding, like an afterthought. That must have been their improved access. It snaked through low ground that flooded every spring. I sent Laura everything. She called back 20 minutes later. Her voice had changed. Tight. Focused. They can't do this. That's what I thought. No, she said, sharper now. They really cannot do this. An easement isn't a suggestion. It's a property right. They would need a formal legal process to extinguish or relocate it. Court approval. Compensation. Something. They didn't ask. They didn't ask because they assumed you'd roll over. There it was again. That assumption. Laura told me to stay put. She was filing an emergency motion for injunctive relief. I didn't know what that meant in practical terms, but it sounded serious. By noon, she had drafted the paperwork. By 2 o'clock, it was filed. By late afternoon, the court had scheduled a hearing for the next morning. That's how fast things move when someone messes with recorded property rights. I went back to the motel that evening and got another room. I watched from a distance as dump trucks continued hauling dirt, as crews kept framing houses deeper inside the development like nothing was wrong. I wondered if Brandon had any idea what was coming. The next morning, I put on the only suit I own. It still smelled faintly like the last wedding I attended. The courthouse in our county isn't big. 2 courtrooms, creaky floors, portraits of retired judges staring down at you like they're still deciding cases from beyond the grave. Laura met me on the steps. She had a legal pad tucked under her arm and that same calm look she gets before a trial. They'll argue they provided alternative access, she said quietly. They'll say it's equivalent or better. It floods. That helps us. We walked into the courtroom, and there he was. Brandon Kessler. Crisp navy suit. Polished shoes. His attorney beside him, a tall guy from Nashville I'd never seen before. Brandon gave me a nod like we were at a networking event. The judge, an older man named Harold Whitman, took the bench and got right to it. Laura spoke first. She laid out the timeline, the easement language, the photographs. She described the berm, the destruction, the unilateral relocation. Her voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath it. Then Brandon's attorney stood up. Your Honor, Harbor Crest Development has acted in good faith. The prior gravel path was substandard and interfered with a planned main thoroughfare. We constructed a new access route on the eastern boundary that improves safety and usability for Mr. Reynolds. I almost laughed at improved safety. Judge Whitman leaned forward. Counselor, was the original easement extinguished through a legal proceeding? The attorney hesitated. Just a flicker. No, Your Honor. Was there written consent from the easement holder? No. The judge looked down at the documents, then back up. Then on what authority did your client destroy the existing right-of-way? There wasn't a good answer to that. They tried to dress it up in phrases like development necessity and mutual benefit, but none of it changed the simple fact that they had taken a recorded property right and bulldozed it. The judge's ruling was immediate. He granted the injunction, ordered Harbor Crest to restore the original easement to its prior condition within 72 hours, remove the obstruction, reinstate access. He also ordered them to cover my legal fees and warned that failure to comply would result in contempt proceedings. You could feel the air shift in the room. Brandon's jaw tightened. Not outrage, not apology, just irritation that his schedule had been disrupted. Outside the courtroom, he finally spoke directly to me. This didn't have to escalate, he said. You buried my road, I replied. We offered you a better solution. You offered me something I didn't agree to. He shook his head slightly, like I was being stubborn over a minor inconvenience. Development requires flexibility. Not from me. For a split second, I saw something flash in his eyes. Not anger exactly. More like recalculation. What he didn't know yet was that the injunction was just the beginning. Because when Laura filed that motion, she also sent copies to the county planning department. And when the judge issued his order, it triggered something bigger. Destroying a recorded easement without authorization isn't just a civil issue between neighbors. It raises questions about permits, about approved site plans, about whether the development is actually following the conditions it agreed to. 2 days after the hearing, county inspectors showed up at Stonehaven Preserve, and they didn't come quietly. By the time the county trucks rolled in, word had already started spreading. Small towns have their own version of social media. It's called the hardware store, the diner, and Sunday morning church parking lots. By Friday, folks were asking me, you the one fighting that big development? Like I'd signed up for a boxing match. I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like a guy who just wanted to get home without climbing a dirt mountain. The 72-hour deadline ticked down fast. On the second morning, I drove out to the site again, this time parking where my road used to begin. The berm was still there, but something had changed. The bright red county vehicles were lined up near the sales trailer. Inspectors in hard hats walked the property with clipboards and laser levels. I watched from a distance as one of them pointed toward the main boulevard, the one built directly over my original easement. That boulevard wasn't just decorative. It was central. It connected every lot in Phase 1. Pulling it apart wasn't like moving a mailbox. It was surgery. By that afternoon, heavy equipment was back at the berm. Only this time, they were tearing it down. The first scoop of dirt peeled away like a scar reopening. Gravel trucks arrived. Crews worked late into the evening under portable floodlights. They had to reconstruct the roadbed, relay the gravel, regrade it to match the original survey. Laura had made sure the judge's order was specific. Restore it to prior condition. No creative interpretations. I stood there leaning against my truck as the sun went down, watching the shape of my road slowly reappear. It was strange how emotional it felt. That stretch of gravel wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My dad had driven cattle trailers down it. I'd taught my niece how to ride a bike on it when she visited one summer. Seeing it come back was like watching someone stitch a family story back together. Brandon pulled up beside me around dusk. No suit this time. Just a polo shirt and frustration. You're costing us millions, he said quietly. I didn't look at him. You should have read the deed. We had approval for the subdivision layout. Did you have approval to erase my access? He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, you could have worked with us. We could have compensated you. There's a difference between negotiation and demolition, I said. He let out a breath and looked at the crews scrambling to undo what they'd done. Investors don't like uncertainty. That's not my responsibility. Here's the part most people don't see. When the county inspectors started reviewing their permits, they didn't just look at my easement. They looked at everything. Stormwater drainage, setback requirements, grading limits. Turns out, When you're in a rush to build an $800,000 dream, you sometimes shave corners. The inspectors found they had graded beyond approved boundaries in 2 sections. They'd installed a retention pond closer to a property line than regulations allowed. Nothing catastrophic on its own, maybe, but combined with the easement violation, it painted a picture. Within a week, bright red stop work orders were posted on every lot in Phase 1. 15 home sites. Framing halted. Concrete trucks canceled. Realtors left explaining to potential buyers why construction was temporarily paused. Temporarily turned into indefinitely. The investors, a group out of Atlanta, from what I heard, didn't love headlines about legal disputes and county investigations. Funding tightened. Contractors started drifting to other projects. Momentum evaporated. All because someone decided my road was expendable. 3 days after the berm came down, I drove my truck down the restored gravel for the first time. It wasn't perfect yet. The surface was fresh, loose in spots. But it was there, straight as it had always been. Familiar. Halfway down, I stopped and cut the engine. It was quiet again. No bulldozers. No generators. Just wind moving through the trees. I sat there thinking about something Brandon had said. Development requires flexibility. Maybe it does. But flexibility isn't the same as surrender. And progress doesn't mean erasing the people who were there first. A month later, I heard Stonehaven Preserve was officially restructuring. That's the polite term. The big stone entrance sign stayed up for a while, like a monument to ambition. Then even that came down. As for Brandon, I haven't seen him since. Last I heard, he'd moved on to another project in another county. I sometimes wonder if he tells this story differently. Maybe in his version, I'm the stubborn landowner who tanked a visionary community. But here's the thing. I never asked for a fight. I asked for a road. The one that was promised in ink and recorded in the courthouse long before luxury brochures and drone footage. And yeah, part of me felt vindicated watching those stop work orders go up. I won't pretend otherwise. There's a certain satisfaction in seeing consequences land where they're due. But there was also something heavier under that satisfaction. It shouldn't take a courtroom to make someone respect your boundary. What gets me is how easy it was for them to assume I'd accept whatever they decided was better. That because I live alone at the end of a gravel road, I wouldn't push back. That convenience for the many automatically outweighs rights of the few. Maybe sometimes it does. But not like that. Not without consent. Not without process. I still drive that same half-mile every day. It's dusty in the summer, muddy in the spring. Sometimes I think about paving it just to remove the irony. But then I remember why I kept it gravel in the first place. It reminds people to slow down, to feel where they are. So here's what I'm curious about. If you were in my position, would you have handled it differently? If a developer offered you a better access point without asking first, would you see it as progress or overreach? At what point does growth become entitlement? I don't think this is just about one road in Tennessee. It's about how communities change, who gets heard, and whether long-standing rights still mean something when money shows up with blueprints. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think I was justified or just stubborn. And if you've ever had a neighbor, an HOA, or a developer push past your boundaries, I'd honestly like to hear how it turned out. Because out here, at the end of this gravel road, I've learned something simple. If you don't defend your access, someone else might decide to reroute it.